Hey, what's going on, y'all? Got a interesting video for you here. This home is about 60 years old, so if you're planning to purchase or looking at purchasing an older home, this video is for you. Okay, so testing these outlets like we do every time at Double C Home Inspections. If this outlet is accessible like all of these are in this home, because this home is vacant, we test every single outlet. So as you can see, this shows a fault. What does that mean? Okay, so a fault at this outlet tester, or basically any outlet tester, can mean a lot of different things, but most commonly, and in the case of this home, it means that these outlets inside the home, these receptacles inside the home, if you want to be a stickler for vernacular and vocabulary, these outlets, these receptacles are not grounded. That's really common for an age home like this. This home's over 60 years old. So back when they were building this home didn't have grounded wire. And it still doesn't have the grounded wire in the walls. That's a pretty clear evidence of it when we test the outlets like that and it shows no ground or fault at every single outlet. That means the original wire is still here. Why does that matter to you? For the state of Texas, the people that license me and every other inspector out there, that's a defect. Now, whether those guys all and girls all report it as a defect, that's another story. But legally, they're required to report that as a defect. Again, a home that's 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years old, it's not going to be wired the same way a home today would be, not even close. So it's going to have that defect pretty much without fail. In fact, I've done almost 5,000 inspections at this point. I don't think I've ever seen an older home that's been rewired. Why is that, you might ask? It's really expensive. You might think that, well, all you gotta do is run some new wire through the walls, put it in these outlets, put it in these light fixtures, and put it on these light switches. But that's not the case, because you got to run it through all these walls, up and down, side to side, all over the place. So for an electrician to do that, they're talking about cutting holes everywhere, drilling holes everywhere, making a tremendous amount of damage to an existing home, and running that new wire. So rather than doing that, in order to make these where every single outlet or every single receptacle in this home is no longer deficient as far as the state of Texas is concerned, there's a number of ways you can get around that, which are perfectly safe, which will no longer mean that this home has defects when it comes to those outlets and those receptacles. They kind of escalate in price. The most expensive, obviously, is rewiring the home. Like I said, I've never seen anybody do that before, but there's the first time for everything, I'm sure. And then scaling down in price, you can do things like putting a GFCI protection on this particular circuit. Like, let's say this is a master bedroom, and they put a GFCI breaker outside at that electrical panel box. So from now on, if there is a ground fault, even though there is no ground, if there is a ground fault, it will protect the user and protect their stuff that's plugged into those receptacles and those outlets. So that's just a cheap fix. The most common one, believe it or not, that I see, when this home was built, these three-prong receptacles, these three-prong outlets, that just wasn't a thing. There weren't three-prong receptacles, there weren't three-prong outlets. It was two-prong, so it was just that hot and that neutral. That two-wire system that it was installed with, that's those old receptacles you may see like in an older home where it doesn't have these three-prong receptacles. That was the original way of doing it. And believe it or not, the most common way I see where remodelers or home flippers or whatever you want to call them are getting around this defect is they're restoring these receptacles back to two-prong receptacles, which is fine. If it's a two-prong receptacle, I'm not, as a homeowner, telling my guest or my tenant or my neighbor or whatever that these are grounded, which is really where the problem comes from. It's not that there's some sort of huge safety risk from an ungrounded outlet. It's more that I'm telling somebody whether it's me or my family or friends or whatever, that these receptacles are grounded when actually they're not. And what can happen is you plug in the TV or computer or whatever and it's not grounded, you have some sort of electrical fault, it can damage the equipment. That's the most common problem with the ungrounded receptacle or ungrounded outlet. So yeah, you can get around it by putting that two-prong receptacle, that two-prong outlet back in place like it used to be 60 years ago. Of course, obviously, I don't have to tell you probably, the problem with that is you do that, then you have all this stuff that has a three-prong plug on it. Now what are you gonna do? We gotta get out of those stupid adapters and slap them on every single thing you're gonna plug in all throughout the house. You're really not accomplishing anything because this item, this computer or TV or whatever that's supposed to be grounded is not grounded still. So nothing's really changed from a safety standpoint. It's just gotten around the defect, the inspector reporting the defect problem. So those are your options. If I were suggesting it to somebody, I always suggest the GFCI fix, the putting a GFCI breaker covering a circuit where you're protecting all the outlets. You can leave those three-prong receptacles in place. Everybody's happy, you're safe, your stuff's safe, your neighbor's safe, whatever. You can do that with outlets, like GFCI outlets at the front of the circuit that control everything downstream, or you could do a breaker in that electrical panel box at your house. The breakers are more expensive, but of course they cover probably a bigger area in most cases. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Electrician would be the person you'd want to refer that to. Obviously, don't try to do that yourself. So that's a really common defect that I see. You know, I inspected in West Texas, and the vast majority of the homes in West Texas were built in the 50s and 60s. That's when the boom happened. I don't know about the rest of the country, but that's the way it is here. So there's a lot of homes from the 50s and 60s and 70s in these neighborhoods in West Texas, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, you name it, all the small towns too. So this defect is recurrent. I see this multiple times a week. But when you see it as a home buyer for the first time especially, you're probably going to be surprised and maybe even freak out. But it's not a big deal. Really, really common, easy to fix, relatively inexpensive to fix. And you're safe, your stuff's safe, everybody's happy. The home inspector won't report it as a defect. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you got questions, comments, please post them down there at the bottom of the video. You know how it works on YouTube. And of course, if you want to reach out to schedule a home inspection or got questions for me individually, feel free to reach out. You'll see the link to the website also in our comments and description area for the YouTube video. But if I can help you with anything, anyway, feel free to reach out anytime. Hope you have a great day.